Summer, 1940. A shadow has fallen across Europe. One by one, nations have crumbled under the relentless march of Axis forces. France, the Netherlands, Belgium, Norway, all have been overwhelmed. Now only one major power stands defiant in Western Europe, the United Kingdom. Isolated and facing an imminent threat of invasion, Britain finds itself in the most perilous moment in its modern history. The cities are tense, the people are anxious, and the future is shrouded in uncertainty. Across the English Channel, the victorious German war machine gathers its strength, preparing for the final push to bring Britain to its knees. The plan is codenamed Operation Sea Lion, an ambitious amphibious and airborne invasion of the British mainland. But before a single soldier can land on British shores, Germany must achieve one critical objective: complete air superiority. They must neutralize the Royal Air Force, destroy its airfields, cripple its command centers, and break the will of the British people from the sky. What followed was not a battle on land or sea, but a desperate, sprawling conflict fought in the clouds. This was the Battle of Britain, a turning point where the courage of a few pilots and the resilience of an entire nation would determine the course of the Second World War. This is a story of how control of the skies decided the fate of a nation. The challenge facing the Royal Air Force was immense. On paper, the odds were stacked heavily against them. The German Luftwaffe, fresh from its victories across the continent, was a battle-hardened and formidable force. It boasted experienced pilots, proven aircraft like the Messerschmitt Bf 109 and the Junkers Ru 87 Stuka dive bomber, and a staggering numerical advantage. At the start of the battle, the Luftwaffe could deploy over 2,500 aircraft against Britain, including nearly 1,200 single-engine fighters. The ROF's fighter command, in contrast, had just over 600 frontline fighters to defend the entire country. The pressure on these pilots was unimaginable. They were outnumbered, often flying multiple sorties a day, exhausted but resolute. Every dawn brought the promise of another wave of enemy bombers and fighters crossing the coast. But Britain wasn't defenseless. It held two secret weapons that would prove decisive. The first was a revolutionary piece of technology: radar, known as the Chain Home System. It was a string of radar stations along the south and east coasts of England. This system was the world's first integrated air defense network. It could detect incoming enemy aircraft formations long before they reached a British coastline, giving the RAF precious time to scramble its fighters, coordinate intercepts, and position them at the right altitude and location. Instead of flying wasteful standing patrols, RAF pilots could conserve fuel and energy, meeting the enemy on more favorable terms. The Germans underestimated its effectiveness, a mistake that would cost them dearly. The second, and perhaps most important, advantage was the unyielding spirit of the British people and the pilots who defended them. From the ground crews working tirelessly day and night to repair and rearm damaged aircraft, to the factory workers building new Spitfires and Hurricanes at a record pace, to the ordinary citizens who endured the nightly bombings of the Blitz, the entire nation was mobilized. People prepared makeshift air raid shelters in their backyards, known as Anderson shelters. Strict blackout regulations were enforced, plunging cities into darkness to make them harder for bombers to target. Families would gather around the radio, listening to the calm, reassuring voice of the BBC for news and updates, their lives punctuated by the wail of the air raid siren. It was this collective determination, this refusal to buckle under pressure, that formed the backbone of Britain's defense. The pilots in the sky knew they were not fighting alone. They were the tip of the spear, backed by the full weight and will of a united nation. Who were these pilots? These young men tasked with defending the skies against such overwhelming odds. They were not just British. The ranks of the RAF's fighter command were a testament to the international coalition that had formed to resist the Axis. While the majority were from the UK, they were joined by brave volunteers from all corners of the globe. There were entire squadrons of Polish pilots, men who had escaped the fall of their own country and were fiercely motivated to continue the fight. They were among the most skilled and aggressive aviators in the battle, accounting for a disproportionately high number of enemy aircraft shot down. Pilots from Czechoslovakia, who had also seen their homeland overrun, brought their own combat experience and a burning desire for retribution. There were aviators from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa, representing the Commonwealth's commitment to the cause. Men from Neutral Ireland and the United States crossed the border into Canada to enlist. Volunteers came from Belgium, France, and even a prince from the Kingdom of Nepal. Together, this diverse group formed a remarkable and powerful team. They shared the same cramped briefing rooms, flew the same aircraft, and faced the same mortal dangers. Their different accents and backgrounds mattered little in the cockpit. What united them was a shared purpose and an extraordinary bravery. It was this group of airmen that Prime Minister Winston Churchill immortalized with his famous words, speaking to the House of Commons on August 20, 1940. At the height of the battle, he paid tribute to their sacrifice, the gratitude of every home in our island, in our empire, and indeed throughout the world except in the abodes of the guilty, goes out to the British airmen who, undaunted by odds, unwearied in their constant challenge and mortal danger, are turning the tide of the world war by their prowess and by their devotion. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. From that moment on, they would forever be known as the few. Their incredible effort did more than just protect British cities and military targets. It kept the nation's morale alive, providing a powerful symbol of defiance against an enemy that had seemed, until then, invincible. As the summer of 1940 wore on, the battle raged with ferocious intensity. The Luftwaffe shifted its tactics, first targeting coastal shipping and ports, then moving inland to attack RAF airfields and radar stations in a desperate attempt to blind fighter command. This was the most critical phase of the battle. Airfields like Biggin Hill and Kenley were repeatedly bombed, hangars were destroyed, runways were cratered, and ground crews worked under constant threat of attack to keep the planes flying. Pilots were pushed to their absolute limits, sometimes flying 5 or 6 missions in a single day, snatching a few moments of sleep in a chair between sorties. Losses were heavy on both sides, yet Britain's defense did not break. It bent, but it held firm. The integrated defense system, orchestrated by Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, proved its worth. Damaged aircraft were repaired with astonishing speed, thanks to civilian repair organizations that worked alongside the RAF. New fighters were rolling off the production lines faster than the Germans anticipated. The home field advantage was crucial. RAF pilots who bailed out over England could often be back at their airbase and flying again within hours, while German pilots who were shot down became prisoners of war. The British pilots were also gaining invaluable experience with every engagement. They were learning the enemy's tactics, perfecting their own, and fighting with the fierce determination of men defending their own homes. By early September, frustrated by the RAF's refusal to be destroyed, the German High Command made a fateful and strategic error. In response to a British bombing raid on Berlin, an infuriated Hitler ordered the Luftwaffe to switch its main focus from RAF airfields to bombing London and other major cities. This new phase, known as the Blitz, was intended to terrorize the civilian population into submission. While it brought unimaginable suffering to the people on the ground, it gave the battered RAF a desperately needed breathing space. The pressure on its airfields eased, allowing fighter command to repair, regroup, and strengthen. The tide was beginning to turn. The relentless attacks on cities failed to break British morale. Instead, they stiffened it. As German bomber formations flew towards London, they were met by increasingly large and well-organized groups of Spitfires and Hurricanes. The Luftwaffe's losses began to mount at an unsustainable rate. September 15, 1940, is now commemorated as Battle of Britain Day. On this day, the Luftwaffe launched a massive all-out daylight assault on London, believing the RAF was on its last legs. They were met by a massive and coordinated defense that inflicted devastating losses. It became clear to the German High Command that air superiority was not achievable. Shortly after, Operation Sea Lion, the planned invasion of Britain, was postponed indefinitely. The battle for the skies had been won. The legacy of the Battle of Britain is profound and far-reaching. It was the first major defeat for the German war machine and a monumental turning point in the Second World War. By securing Britain's survival, the battle ensured that the island would remain a crucial base for future Allied operations, including the D-Day landings that would ultimately lead to the liberation of Europe. It was a demonstration that the Axis powers were not invincible. The battle became a powerful symbol of national resilience, a story of how a nation, when united and determined, could withstand even the most terrible of threats. It also showcased the critical importance of air power in modern warfare and highlighted the impact of technology, like radar, when combined with effective strategy and human courage. The sleek, elliptical wings of the Supermarine Spitfire and the rugged, reliable Hawker Hurricane became iconic symbols of this defiance, revered to this day. But the most enduring legacy belongs to the few. The young pilots from many nations who flew in those summer months of 1940 became legends. Their bravery, their sacrifice, and their unwavering resolve in the face of overwhelming odds inspired an entire generation and continue to inspire us today. They showed the world what can be achieved when people stand together for freedom, even in the darkest of times. The Battle of Britain was far more than just a campaign fought by aircraft. It was a test of a nation's character, its technological ingenuity, and its collective will to survive. The response from the pilots in the air, the workers in the factories, and the ordinary people in the streets marked one of the most crucial and inspiring chapters of the 20th century, proving that even when a nation stands alone, the human spirit can be its greatest defense. Thank you for watching this episode of WW2 Chronicles. If you found this story of courage and resilience inspiring, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more true stories that shaped our world.